Good morning and Eid Mubarak to our Muslim brothers. Welcome to the show. I'm Neota Igbe.
Indeed, Eid Mubarak. Welcome to Sunrise. Look who's dressed in all the colors of sunrise this morning. The sun has risen greatly this beautiful Friday morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Yes, indeed. It's a colorful Friday on both sides of the divide this morning. And happy Mubarak, Eid Mubarak to our Muslim brothers and sisters. I am Bukola Koka.
It's Friday, April 21. Good morning. I'm Ayo Makide, and just to remind those of you who are not Muslims, it's not the one that you have to ask them for ram. No, this is not that one. Just putting it out there.
Well, it's Friday, and it's the celebration of our Muslim brothers and sisters who have ended their fasting in the holy month of Ramadan. So there's going to be a lot of celebration, a lot of eating and drinking, and we're looking forward to having some of those fried meat, you know.
This is not the one for
here
ram.
in Lagos, and of course in Abuja, I believe.
This is not the one for ram. Haba.
This is not the one for ram. Oh, okay. You know, we mixed it up. But we're talking about food, and you know, nutrition, food sufficiency commands our attention this morning, and the conference of ECOWAS yesterday, you know, in Abuja on nutrition security compels our attention. So they're drawing our attention to malnutrition on the continent, the lack of balanced diet in children. I believe 16%. Let's just take a very quick look at some of the things that they would rather have us pay attention to. A paltry 16% of children access 5 food groups. You know, we're taught about balanced diet even in primary and secondary school, and as we grew up, we would see our mom put up, you know, a picture of, you know, a food plan for the week in front of the kitchen or maybe somewhere on the dining table. But what's the percentage of Nigerian children who have access to a balanced diet across the country? You know, we can also tie all of these issues to agriculture, to insecurity, how insecurity has affected Nigerians. A UNICEF report says that 25 million Nigerians are at a risk of food insecurity, and that's up from 17 million of that report conducted by a French group, non-governmental organization. Earlier than that, you know, about 7 million percent increase, 7 million increase rather. So, you know, this goes back to our budget. What's our budget saying? How much of our budget percentage do we commit to agriculture? And, you know, closely related to that, as I've also said, is the challenge of insecurity. A lot of those, you know, farmers who are supposed to be on the farms are no longer on the farms. They are either kidnapped on their farms or they are killed on their farms. This is also, we can also tie it to, you know, empowering the woman. The woman is the one who provides for the family. So, you know, the child education is also part of it. You know, when a girl is educated, you know, you have empowered a nation such that she can take decisions on, you know, her reproductive rights, her economic independence, how to earn. So all of these issues, one way or the other, are related. Ayo.
You know, there are so many issues connected to this thing that we're raising this morning. And it's auspicious that it's coming on a day when we are celebrating the end of the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting, you know, for a group of people. And talking about groups, you know, one of the things that came from that data that was displayed by the NBS at that event was that there are 8 food groups that are necessary to eradicate, to balance food, you know, in the name of malnutrition, to have a functional meal. 8 food groups, you know, proteins, carbohydrates, but you know,
fats and oil,
it's
minerals.
Very distressing to realize, according to that report or from that report, that only in most cases, a paltry 16% of children have access to 5 food groups. Only 15% in the whole nation. And there is this understanding by many, many people that especially in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, most parts of Africa, the belief, that's the data right there in your face. The belief is that, look, just eat. What you eat doesn't matter. Just eat and fill your tummy. What you eat is not, it doesn't matter. And that's very, very distressing and very, very disturbing. Now, tie this same thing to productivity, which was the issue of contention for the Minister of Health, who was at that meeting. By 2050, it's about 25, a little over 25 years from now, Africa, sub-regional Africa, this West African sub-region, is going to have 600 million man population. 400 million of them, according to the minister, are likely to be young people. And guess who are the people that we are not even educating in the Department of Food Production, Agriculture? The same young people. Mm-hmm. So who is going to ensure that we have adequate food security, mm-hmm. much less?
Mm. And a huge percentage of that 400 million happens to be in Nigeria. So
the issues are, right, I mean, yes, I mean, going by the data we have from the elections, about the average age of Nigerians are about 18 or thereabouts. So this is the challenge that we have on our hands. And the question that was asked by the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, was, look, we know that this is going to happen. What are we doing to take advantage of that population? Advantage of that population. The president of the AFDB also said, look, our young people are not liabilities, they are assets. What are we doing to galvanize them in this direction? They have skills that the older generation don't have. Who is providing leadership to ensure they lead not just in tech, as mm-hmm. they do already, but in food production as well, to eradicate malnutrition that, if we are not careful, is already knocking at the door. Markwe?
Why me? Well, you both have said a lot. There's a lot to also think about. I mean, a lot really to ponder. And as you were speaking, I was making notes. Just to also say, Bukola, don't worry. Never mind that this is not the Salah where the ram is killed, but nonetheless, there will be a feast. So please, there's no excuse as to why we shouldn't have some food today.
Your expectations will not be cut off.
Exactly. So never mind Ayo, who keeps saying this is not the one where the ram is killed. It's very apt that we're talking about food this morning, and you know, as Ayo rightly pointed out, it's a time when our Muslim brothers and sisters have come to the end of their fast. I mean, not so long ago, Christians celebrated Easter, which usually marks also the end of Lent. The Lenten season is when people are supposed to, you know, be sober as well, you know, fast, make sacrifices, you know, show more, well, I say, remorse for the sins which they have committed. And I remember that when I was in university, you know, when I was in school, a priest, our parish priest then, or there's a name, our chaplain in the university used to say that every time we talk about fast, you know, he doesn't think that Africans are amongst the people that should be fasting, that already on a daily basis we'll be fasting, you know, our people rarely have food to eat. And, you know, when this sort of period comes, you know, he doesn't really think that the sacrifice that we should be making is along the lines of food. He thinks that it should be more along the lines of abstaining from sin, making sacrifices, showing more concern, kindness to your neighbor, etc., etc. And I used to really deeply agree with him, because when you think about, I mean, for instance, then as a student, how much do you really eat? And what kind of food did you really eat? And when you now start to put into perspective, and even as a student, then I was very fortunate. I could at least afford 2 meals a day, not paid for by myself. So let's not even go there. We're talking about people who can barely eke a living. You know, we're talking about children who are left to fend for themselves oftentimes. We're talking about people who might not even be able to see the four walls of any classroom. We're talking about farmers who have lost almost everything because they live from season to season, and it is what they're able to harvest in one season. After they've sold off maybe the best of what it is that they have so they can have some money, they keep the rest to tide them to the next farming season. So big questions as to what exactly, now that we have the statistics, what are we going to do about them? As Ayo pointed out, now that we know what this is, he said President Obasanjo was saying that we need to galvanize our youths. But when leaders know that there is a problem at hand, the solutions also lie sometimes in those problems. So you look at malnutrition, the fact that you have a youth bulge to feed. This youth bulge can also work to make the food that they plan to eat, or that they will eat eventually. What are we doing to ensure that every single home takes up agriculture or takes up a bit of farming? What are we doing to ensure that groups, corporate bodies, societies, religious bodies see the land as one way that we all can, get our hands dirty and, bring food to the table? When you think about our country, Nigeria, we're way too blessed to be talking about malnutrition. Almost anywhere in this country, throw something there, throw a seed there, in no time, especially if it's during the rainy season, you come back and you suddenly can be guaranteed a harvest. So it's very painful to think that in this same country, out of a lack of prudence, out of a lack of proper management, we're also speaking of malnutrition. It's a lot of work. Whoever is going to be taking over the reins, the president-elect certainly has his work cut out for him. The governors-elect, because agriculture is not just something that is at the federal level. The states, yes, also have a great responsibility. And interestingly, land is domiciled within the purview of the states. So a lot of work cut out for our governors, especially because they are the ones in charge of land. That Land Use Act is not for nothing. So let us hope that, even us, this young people, maybe I don't qualify anymore, but at least even those of us who do this white-collar work, so to speak, should not feel that we're excluded from it. The fact that inflation is eating a great deal of what it is that we earn also points to the fact that there isn't sufficient, to go around, and that's why, some of these, we're feeling the effect on what it is that we earn. So let us be interested in what is happening, and let us see how it is that we can proffer solutions. But it is the responsibility of somebody to galvanize, to make sure that these solutions, which is among the populace, eventually come out and solve the problems that we have. Nyota.
This conversation is not a conversation that you can have in isolation. A conversation around food and nutrition. So while we were talking, while I was talking, you were taking statistics. While you were talking, I was trying to sketch out a map of West Africa, a tiny map here, to look at and see where West Africa is located in terms of the weather conditions. This is like the food basket of Africa, so to speak, because from every angle, from the north, from the waterfront, from the oceans, from the east, from down here, from the central, everybody's headed towards that side to collect. And we had a guest here who talked about the fact that people are coming into Nigeria, this belt, Ghana, Togo, Nigeria's belt, because that's the green belt, so to speak, to look for food. And so we have the issue of access to food and then access to nutrition. It's not enough that you have the food. Are you eating it? Well, are you putting them together in their proper proportions, and then is that available to everyone? Yes, we've reeled out the statistics. So many things are affecting this. We talked about the other day about the rising cost of food, and it looks as if it continues every day. What are the things affecting the availability, first of all, of food, before you even begin to talk about the nutritional value of the food you're eating, security, weather, as in climate change, security, climate change, money. And so you find people, growing up, we had small gardens behind the houses.
Indeed.
But now everywhere is built up, so people are looking for small containers to put. There are people who are doing farms, hydroponic farms, where they don't need land again. So many things. But we can all galvanize our efforts towards ensuring that even for the households, we have the little vegetables, the green vegetables to feed us. I mean, that's what I know. My mom would always go to the back of the house to pluck out some leaves and prepare soup, or pluck out some leaves that are added to yam porridge or added to rice, just to add some vegetables to what we eat. And so you find out that they lived longer. They lived healthier.
In that regard, I'm so proud of myself right now. I mean, I just...
Oh, you do have a small garden.
I do.
So wherever you are, you can actually build yourself a small garden where you have small vegetables to add to whatever it is you're doing. So it's regardless of your status in life.
Indeed.
Regardless of where you are.
No, status, you must eat, though. Are you going to eat status?
You must eat. So while you were discussing availability of food, availability to nutrition for the adults, for the children, and for everyone. We can all come together. Beyond, you talked about what the government need to do.
Yeah.
But beyond what the government needs to do, it's what the individuals can and should do where they are. Take care of your environment. Protect your environment. Put away your waste effectively. See, I've moved away from food now to environment.
Don't let the environmental advocates get started now.
But it's all
intertwined.
It's all intertwined.
Yes,
but you know what? Whatever you do, it boils down to what you can and should do to ensure that around you, you're a plus. You're adding value to your environment, to your food, and to those around you. But we'll take a moment and we'll return to look at what the papers are saying about everything that we talked about today. Don't go away.
Well, taking a look at Friday's dailies for you. Vanguard Newspapers is here, and look at what they have on the front page. Buhari okays suspension of Adamawa wreck prosecution if, well, the if now then has ellipsis. INEC denies meeting with Adamawa government officials to rig polls. It's on page 9 of the paper. You might want to flip to page 9 to see that story. Judiciary created crisis in Labour Party. That's according to the DG while he was here yesterday. And this is what he had to say on the matter. Eid al-Fitr, Buhari, Tinubu, Obi, NLC, others felicitate with Muslims, call for unity. Sultan announces end of Ramadan fasting, declares today Eid al-Fitr. So you find story on page 35 of the paper. May 29 handover, Tinubu unveils 14-man committee. The story is on page 5 as well, so don't let anyone pluck out your page 5 for Vanguard Newspapers. Look at the back pages. Vanguard Sports, to win Champions League, I have to beat Real Madrid, says Guardiola. And just in case you're wondering what's happening locally, under 20 FIFA World Cup draw, Flying Eagles land in pot 3. So what will be in that pot? Who will they be facing as a result of being in pot 3? You might want to flip to the back page of Vanguard Newspapers. Let's leave it there for the daily.
No, they've already been given a mandate to win the Under-20 World Cup. Let's see how that works out. But now we have the Guardian here, and this is what they start with. Passport, international travel. Said despite express centers, corruption, racketeering hobble passport application process. Despite express centers. And that picture is a picture of one of the express centers, I believe, of the Nigeria Immigration Service. So, but you go to page 4 and 5 for details of that story. They call it the big story on page 4 and 5. Then Eid al-Fitr, continue Ramadan values, be modest, vigilant. Sultan, IGP, DSS tell Nigerians. Continue Ramadan values, be modest, vigilant. Sultan, IGP, DSS tell Nigerians. That is on page 6. Then the Adamawa poll, INEC denies partisanship as Falana urges NBC to sanction NTA. That's on page 3. And then part of what we talked about earlier, Nigeria, India, top in children lacking single routine vaccination as health. It's on page 3. And that's it from The Guardian.
And very quickly, let's flip to the Nigerian Tribune. It has a potpourri of stories for you this morning, and a lot of them, affect you in one way or the other. Let's begin with the big story. Adamawa poll. Buhari approves suspension of REC, orders probe of security officers. Just two riders here for you. We didn't compromise process. INEC counters Binani. Of course, we heard INEC, respond to some of the allegations yesterday. And this rider perhaps provides a bigger insight to who exactly INEC was responding to. But just in case you're curious, you'll find details on page 5. Well, the second rider says, probe allegation of 2 billion naira bribe. Falana tasks EFCC, ICPC. I believe that's a follow-up to his appearance right here on Sunrise Daily from yesterday. Take a look at this one right under that. It has to do with security. Bandits have taken over 6,000 square kilometers of our land. That's ascribed to SOCAPO. That's the Southern Kaduna People's Union. This is interesting. And I believe this also has to do with farming, agriculture that we're talking about earlier on today, because land is not just for habitation, it's not just, a commonwealth of ancestry for the people, but also, a space for agricultural development. So this has huge implications besides the challenge of insecurity that SOCAPO is drawing the attention of government to. And I heard, apart from agriculture, I heard one of the, army chiefs saying yesterday during that report presentation in Kaduna that the government must also deploy non-kinetic means of tackling insecurity by encouraging the people to live, in peace. That's also key. But one of the things that the people have said over time is that the government knows what to do, but they're not doing it to sufficiently reining on banditry, insurgency in southern Kaduna. So that's a question that government has shied away from answering over time. Ayo?
Yeah, most certainly. As we often say, government has its job cut out for it. I find the story under the picture on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune quite interesting as well, where the poultry farmers are saying that they lost so much money.
I was headed there. Naira redesign, we lost 50 billion naira to egg glut as ascribed to poultry farmers.
Just imagine, that. 50 billion naira to egg glut, and just guess how many eggs we lost as a result of that. So
just to provide an insight, some of the egg farmers would say that the bulk of their business profit is derived from daily purchase. It's not like other businesses where they buy in bulk. It's dependent on that young girl from the neighboring house coming to buy 10 eggs, 5 eggs. So that's how they make their profit. But during the Naira redesign challenge, where there was paucity of cash, they couldn't make sales.
Especially, I saw a video, I don't know how many people saw it, of a man saying, look, there are eggs all over the place, but we even had to cut down the price. And guess what? People just wouldn't buy it. Anyway. The Nigeria New Telegraph newspaper has this one on its front page. The lead story, Salah transition. DSS foils planned attack on northern state. This ties to, I was hoping that this would just be about greeting and everyone, but and everything like that. But to imagine that there is a planned attack that was foiled by DSS on a day like this. Look at the riders. NAB's gunmen in Kano. IGP orders tight security nationwide. Military intelligence community will contain threats to peace and security. That's according to the DHQ, says follow-up operations ongoing. Right under that picture are a couple of stories there. One of them, Idil Fitri, Buhari, Lawan, Kalu, Tinubu, Atiku, Sanwo-Olu, Obi, Makinde, others felicitate Muslims, preach peace, unity, patriotism. Sultan declares today Idil Fitri Day. That story you find on pages 2, 3, and 26 of the paper this morning, among several other stories on the front page. And just this last one, study finds gray hair can regain pigments. Stories on page 28. That's a new Telegraph this morning and an end to some of the dailies this morning. We're back right after now to take on the issue from the beginning. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Let's begin with one of the quotes that you saw earlier from the Minister of the Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, who said, "The self-restraint, self-denial, sacrifice, and deep spiritual consciousness that accompanied the fasting period should not end, but be maintained and improved upon in order to be a better person and true worshipper." Let's have a discussion around this in order to sustain the lessons of Ramadan with Abdulaziz Alatoye, who is National Head Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat of Nigeria, joins us virtually from Ojokoro in Lagos. Thank you for joining us this morning. Looking at that statement from the Minister of the Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, how do we sustain those lessons?
Okay, thanks very much, Ayo, and happy Salah celebration to all Muslims and non-Muslims all over Nigeria. The month of Ramadan is actually a month of training. So it is expected that when we do rehearsal, we maintain that rehearsal when we get to the football pitch, if I can liken it to that. And we have to demonstrate what we have learned in the month of Ramadan for the rest 11 months. What that means is that we should abstain from all the evil deeds, and we should imbibe all the good things we have learned in the month of Ramadan. And this is one of the reasons we thank Almighty Allah for bringing the month of Ramadan, every 12 months. So that we refresh ourselves. We have this spiritual training. It's also a moral training, as well as physical training, by abstaining from all that are evil spiritually, all that are evil morally, all that are evil physically. So this is what we have gone through for the past 1 month. And we expect that those trainings will continue for the next 11 months, when we will refresh again and try to train again for another 1 month that we will use for another 11 months. And this is the reason we always thank Almighty Allah for giving us the opportunity to train ourselves, every 1 month in every 12 calendar month. So it is a rebirth for us that we will always leave our evil ways or our wrong ways. So, and that is why sometimes it's amazing to me that people go back to what they were doing, after Ramadan. So the message of the Honorable Minister is actually very germane, that we don't go back to all those things. We should demonstrate love that we are demonstrating during Ramadan. We should demonstrate restraints that we are demonstrating during Ramadan. In Ramadan, you cannot abuse person. You cannot attack person. You cannot do any form of evil. Apart from that, you have to be very generous. You have to take care of your neighbor. You have to take care of people generally. So you do good. So if we sustain this training in the Ramadan, I believe it is going to be very beneficial to us, as a country, as well as people generally. So I absolutely agree with the statement of the Honorable Minister that Muslims should never go back to all those things that we have dropped that are not good, and we should sustain all those things that are good. Because if we look at the essence of Ramadan, that Allah gave us that commandment that we should fast and compulsorily train ourselves. It says that, yeah, you are ladina amanu, kutiba alaykum siyam, kama kutiba ala ladina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. The essence of fasting, O you who believe, I have made it compulsory for you, as I made it for those who are earlier before you, so that you can be righteous, so that you can be God-fearing. A righteous person will always think right.
Well, it's a lot of work. Right. My apologies for butting in, Mr. Latoye, but self-denial, self-restraint, it's a lot of work. And you talked about love at a time when everyone, quite a good number of people would say, I barely have enough for myself. Being able to give that same thing that I don't have to other people is tough. Self-restraint in the face of provocation. One will definitely need the power beyond himself to do that, don't you think?
I absolutely agree, and that is exactly what Ramadan has done. For instance, yes, we don't have sufficiently, but by the time you fast, you have to also sacrifice. You have to pay, for example, Sadaqatul Fitri. However little it is, you must pay something for other people to also enjoy. We should remember that irrespective of how we claim not to have, some other people are not even having up to us. So we then have to make sure that we also sacrifice and contribute to the joy of others. And that is where the logo of love for all and hatred for none comes in. Now, let me come to the issue of provocation. When we are fasting now, if somebody provokes you, what do? You tell him, Anasau, I am fasting. And so therefore, I cannot engage you, in any fiscal, I cannot abuse you, I cannot attack you. The moment you tell the person that I'm fasting, then that means you are declaring peace, absolute peace. There should be no quarrel among us, there should be no abuse, there should be no verbal attack, there should be no physical attack. So this is what Ramadan has trained us in the sight of the highest provocation. And that is why when we look at one verse of the Holy Quran, and it says that, yeah, you are ladina amanos biru. Those of you who are believers, you must be very patient. Is biru, you must be very patient. Waso biru, warahabitu. Again, you must be patient and you must be steadfast on that act of patience. There should be no amount of provocation that will make somebody to start abusing another person or to start beating another person, which is animalistic. And this is exactly what Ramadan, has taught us. Yes, I agree with you. It's a very difficult thing. Almighty Allah also says it in the Holy Quran that وَمَا يُلَقَوْهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَمَا يُلَقَوْهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. It is not possible for those who do not have, steadfastness in the act of patience. You must be very patient in this life. You see a lot of provocations, but then at the side of that provocation, you have to demonstrate maturity. You have to demonstrate stability in the act of patience. We've been in a scenario where, for instance, I give you a very live example very recently. Some people went to my land, you call them maybe a Jagunbal or whatever, with police and all the rest. And I calmed them down. I said, relax. Land belongs to Almighty Allah. There is no need for fighting, no need for quarreling. If you want to take the land, why don't you take the normal procedure? You approach me, you don't need to bring gun, you don't need to, all of them were hands down.
Indeed, Mr. Latoye, Christians, individuals, regardless of their faith, require some form of steadfastness to, abide by, those values that you talk about. And whether we're Christians or Muslims or even traditionalists, we don't have a paucity of faiths in Nigeria. We have, in fact, a surfeit of faiths in Nigeria. And, it reminds me, I'm reading from President Muhammadu Buhari's Salam message to Muslims in 2019. He says, and I quote, extremism is like cancer, which must be detected and destroyed from its early stages of growth. He goes on to say, Islam is a religion of peace, and we should avoid violent extremist ideas that give Islam a wrong name, because our conducts have more lasting positive impressions than what we say by word of mouth. So it seems that there are those who are temperate, and there are those who, subscribe to some form of fanaticism. Tell us, Ms. Olatoye, what's the dividing line, if there is, between those who are temperate and those who are extreme? And perhaps you could also have admonitions at this very critical time where we need unity in the country.
Thank you very much for that citation from Mr. President, to which I 100% align. Islam is a religion of peace, and it teaches us all peace. And if we look at human value generally, which is very common to all religions, being very peaceful is a common denominator to all of us. And for the fact that Islam means peace, means that no act of violence is even allowed in Islam. The only thing allowed is the right of self-defense, which the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrated to us, and which is in our constitution, and which is generally all over the world. That is what the national law says, the right of self-defense. Beyond that, there is no room for any aggression whatsoever. There is no room for any act of terrorism, any act of extremism. But let me quickly say that the fewer people who want to use religion, to amass wealth to themselves, they have some objectives that has nothing to do with religion. There are three major of those objectives. Number one is for them to, get power to themselves, again, to acquire territories to themselves so that they can acquire wealth to themselves. If you look at these three things that they are pursuing, none of them is an Islamic pillar. Neither is it an Islamic value. Islam teaches us, not to be amassing wealth at the detriment of others. And this is what some people are doing, very small number within the Muslim group that are fanatics. So we use this opportunity of Ramadan to let them reflect again and go back to the right teaching of Islam. Because what they are doing is totally wrong, is totally unacceptable, is un-Islamic, and they are going to answer for all their acts of extremism and fanaticism. Islam, it abhors all forms of fanaticism. And Islam allows us to embrace ourselves. If you look at it during these Ramadan lectures, we've had where the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed the Christians from Nigeria to come and worship inside his mosque in Medina. So how come now a Muslim will say you are attacking another Muslim, talk less of attacking Christians or attacking any other person? We are all created by Allah, and we must have respect for that Allah by not attacking any of his creatures.
Baraka de Salah Alaji Olatoye, this period after the Ramadan, you've said you called it a month of training. Now, one will begin to ask the question, beyond this training, how should the faithful begin to apply the skills acquired, the skills of self-restraint, self-denial, kindness, mercy? How would you advise they begin to apply them in everyday living?
My advice is actually that all the things we have learned we should put them into practice, because the theoretical learning will not be sufficient. And that is why Allah introduced even the practical training. And that is why I gave some examples of if somebody, abuses you, you tell them, no, I don't fight. If we pick, for example, what is a major challenge to us in this country, like election, putting people in post, and then accountability in that post, and all the rest of it. This is a very great lesson for anybody going for election. We should know that it's Allah that appoints people. So allow people the free will to do what they are supposed to do. If you are choosing, go and do the work very honestly and diligently without any fraudulent intention. So these are the learnings we learn, and if we don't put it into practice, it is not useful at all. It means we haven't actually undergone that training. It is like somebody who passes through a classroom, but the classroom doesn't pass through him. You will have listened to what you are taught in the classroom, but invariably, you are not implementing it. The way it should be from the gun to town. What you learn in school, you put in practice in real life. And this is exactly what we are saying. If we don't put what we learned in the last 1 month in practice for the next 12 months, then it means it's an academic exercise. And this is one of the things that we have always been telling Muslims, that look, it is not just you learn for 1 month, you restrain for 1 month, and when that 1 month ends, and then you stop it there. We must stop all acts of violence. It is totally alien to Islam. We must love others, just like the logo of our Jamaat is love for all and hatred for none. You cannot hate any other person. It is totally unacceptable. It's practically unacceptable. You must love your wife, love your children, you love your household, you love your neighbor, you love, the women, food, children, elders. You have to love everyone.
All right.
The love that is required of us. And this is the training that I want everyone to emulate and use in our day-to-day life after this Ramadan.
Well, I sincerely hope that the lessons are sinking in even as you are speaking them. But we also have a guest right here in our Abuja studios, Mr. Kasim Akinreti, who is an adherent of Islam and former chairman, Nigerian Union of Journalists, Lagos chapter, joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and Eid Mubarak to you.
Eid Mubarak.
So let's talk about the end of Ramadan, and some of the things that, maybe non-Muslims don't know about Ramadan. We now know, I know that it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. What more can you tell us about the significance of this month which has just come to an end?
Well, the significance of Ramadan, it's quite a lot of it. It's not about deny yourself of not eating. It goes beyond that. It's about spiritual rejuvenation. And you renew, your closeness with Almighty Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're also good, virtually to everyone. So the good virtues that you exude during that month of Ramadan will have to continue through the rest of your life, not even about, through the rest of the year. And if during that 30 days, you are so close to God, during that 30 days, you refrain from evil deeds, during that 30 days, you show love to someone, during that 30 days, everybody knows that there is tranquility everywhere. So what else do you want to do the rest of your life? You don't do that. You see, if you Steve Jobs, one of those multimillionaires, said when he was at the bedside that the entire life is vanity. Because what he can see now is that just looking at the grave and look at the hereafter. Everything that he has, he just have to live it. So that's part of the major lessons of Ramadan. That whatever you have, share with the people that do not have. Share joy, share love. Don't be violent with anyone. Restrain yourself from so many evil deeds. That is symbolism of Ramadan.
Can you give us a lot more, tell us a bit more about the origins of Ramadan? How did it come to be? How did Muslims get this you know, the season, which is now known as the holiest month in all of Islam?
Well, according to the Holy Quran, fasting has been prescribed for us so that we can be more pious. And fasting has been prescribed for us, that prescribed for the prophets, for everyone, you know, that are common. So it started, that's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it started with the religion itself. So that it is that basic principles that you need to understand. Islam is based on 5 pillars, which, you know, fasting is one of them. And fasting, salat is also there. You know, and also knowing that Almighty Allah is one is also there. And then you also know that, you know, you're going to go for Hajj. You know, one step after the other. But fasting, you know, it's also comes at the height of it, because that's the height of spirituality. If you really believes in what God has asked you to do, you must fast in that place so that you can understand something about steadfastness, fear of God, being kind to people, and these are the bases of life. So it started with Islam in the pristine time, and it has been with us all through, and it will be with us all the days of our lives, because it's one of the basic pillars of Islam that no one, you know, who call themselves a Muslim adherent will not do. And that is why, if you cannot do it, you have to feed some people.
Okay.
And, yeah,
so
and that is why, the reason why you cannot even fast is because if you are not healthy. And so if you can't do that, because it's extremely significant, that is one reason why you have to feed someone so that that person fasts on your behalf. Because the gains, what you are going to, reward you are going to get is extremely manifold. So every conscious Muslim must ensure that he fasts during the month of Ramadan.
Well, we have just finished elections. I think just before we came to Abuja studios, Alhaji Alatoye was talking about politicians and even the electorate as well, and you know, how this should have rubbed off on our processes. And interestingly, we just finished supplementary elections in Adamawa, and we saw, well, not just in Adamawa, in a number of states. Yes, but, you know, I think what happened in Adamawa stood out the most for a number of people. I recall that one of the people who was holding a phone, filming the wreck in Adamawa State when he was making the legal declaration, which he made, was saying that you are fasting.
And he said, fear God.
God is watching you.
Know, honestly, it's extremely regrettable that even the person that was doing this, you know, happens to be a Muslim. And you can see that is why someone was cautioning him that, wait a minute, you are a Muslim, this is the month of Ramadan, and you are committing this atrocious sin. So on the day of Yom Kippur, on the day of judgment, how are you going to account for this? It's as simple as that. So it shows that he does not really internalize the essence of fasting at that point in time. He did not use what they call self-restraint. I think he must have forgotten that. And also forgetting that he's going to be accountable to Almighty Allah on the day of judgment. What I do, is it right or wrong?
Which is a general problem we have across the board.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the adherents of the two major faiths, everyone wonders, how is it that our religion rubs off on our daily life? You have likened the period of Ramadan to the period of practice, you know, for training, for real life, you know. And so people wonder, how is it that we're so religious, yet, you know, very little reflects in the life that we live on a daily basis. Do you really think that there is a way that we can begin to really make sure that the faith which we profess in, you know, whatever faith is, which oftentimes on the line almost of the faith will be love, you know, respect for your neighbor, love for one another, kindness, and all those kinds of things, peace. How do we make sure that it reflects in our daily lives as adherents of Islam, Christianity, you know, whatever faith it is that we profess?
The first part of call is to understand the religion itself. There are 2 books which are very popular, which I will refer people to. There's a book called Towards Understanding Islam. And then there is another book called Islam Response to Contemporary Issues. The first one is by Sheikh Ala Maududi. The second one is by a former head of Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. And these 2 books are quite instructive. about how adherents must understand their religion and know what they do. But if you don't understand what you are doing, there's a tendency for you to go back to go back to your bad ways. So if you internalize the teachings of religion, for example, the teaching of Islam, there is no way, there is no conflict. There should be any conflict in how you are going to exude yourself, how you are going to behave yourself. Repeat, because the reality of it is that when people look at you as a Muslim, as a Christian, or as another worshipper, and you are doing something contrary to the basis of that religion, they are taking aback at what is going on. And that is why this period, we call the period of spiritual rejuvenation. If you have gone through this period of 30 to 29 days to probably adhere strictly to the principles of Islam, then you understand that your lives must reflect that religion. And if you read Quran,
as we wind down here, maybe this will be your closing statement. Right. It says that religion is a personal thing, but we find ourselves in a space where you have to relate with others. Absolutely. So in rounding up, how does your personal faith, how would you work your personal faith going through this period of training? How do you take your personal decision and faith and apply it to your world around you?
It's so simple. Adhere strictly with the principles of Islam, the principles of religion. In no ramifications. There are no two ways about it. Don't say this one is good, you are taking this, you are not taking this. No. And that is why in Islam, you enter the religion, wholeheartedly. There's nothing you are going to leave behind. So you must understand that you represent that particular religion in the way you behave. So when you want to do something that you think it is negative, think that, no, I'm not only doing this on behalf of myself. I'm also doing it because I belong to a particular religion. People will look at me, that is it only about what that religion is all about. Right. So every one of us, let us continue to enjoy self-restraint, be steadfast, to be very near to God. Go back and read the Quran every now and then. Not only during the month of Ramadan. Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, divided into 3 parts. It exudes virtually everything we should do in life.
All right, thank you very much.
So people should go back to that daily, not during the month of Ramadan. Every morning, read the Holy Quran, read the meaning, and that provides oxygen for you to live your life daily.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kazim Akinreti, adherent of Islam and a former chairman, Nigerian Union of Journalists, Lagos chapter. We'll take you to Alhaji Alatoye for your closing statement. Alhaji.
Thank you very much, Ayo. I think the key thing we need to know is that month of fasting is not a mere ritual. It is a month of rehearsal for which we should carry those training forward in the next 11 months. And those who are fasting should not see it as a mere ritual that I was born a Muslim and I must fast. Just like the issue of the wreck being referred, some people are fasting because they believe we are Muslim, we just have to fast. It's beyond that. They must imbibe the training of the essence of the rehearsal and training, and they must make the best use of them for the next 11 months. And they must demonstrate love, they must demonstrate patience, they must demonstrate peaceful coexistence with others. We must be very tolerant. We must avoid all forms of violence. We must avoid untruthfulness. We must avoid corruption. We must avoid embezzlement. We must avoid all acts that are unacceptable in Islam. And this is what we should continuously do on a day-to-day basis. And we should imbibe it as our way of life. This is my parting shots to all Muslims that have fasted.
Thank you very much, Alhaji Abdulaziz Alatoye, National Head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Thanks very much, Emabwe.
Okay, my name is still Nelta. But Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
Happy Eid al-Fitr from Channels Television. Our
after the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, declared that the supplementary election for the governorship seat in Adamawa State, northeast Nigeria, will hold in 69 polling units in 20 of the 21 local government areas of the state, attention shifted to two major contenders, incumbent Governor Ahmadu Fintiri of the People's Democratic Party and Aishatu Dahiru, popularly known as Binani, of the All Progressives Congress APC. After the first round of voting on March 18th, Mr. Fintiri of the PDP led with 421,524 votes, while Binani scored 390,275 votes to trail with 31,249 votes. Collation of results for the governorship supplementary elections in Adamawa State commenced at about 10 p.m. on Saturday, with party agents, security personnel, observer groups, and members of the media present to monitor the process. The state returning officer, Professor Mohammed Mele, alongside two national commissioners of INEC, Dr. Baba Bila, who is the national commissioner supervising Adamawa, Gombe, and Taraba states, as well as Professor Abdullahi Zuku, who is the national commissioner supervising Kano, Katsina, and Jigawa states, monitored the process. The resident electoral commissioner of INEC in the state, Mr. Hudu Ari, is absent, but no reason was given for his absence.
APP scored 0 votes.
One after the other, the local government collation officers presented their results. Between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., results from 10 local government areas were collated, while results from remaining 10 local government areas were being expected. As the waiting continued, the INEC resident electoral commissioner, Mr. Hudu Ari, showed up and announced the adjournment of the process. However, before the scheduled time, and while stakeholders were yet to reconvene, Mr. Ari showed up at about 9 a.m. in the company of some heads of security agencies in the state and declared the results.
No, you are not. No! It can't happen. This is not fair. You cannot.
Most of the mainstream media were absent, and only those with phones could capture the moment. But while the controversy was on, the governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Mrs. Aishatu Binani, gave an acceptance speech. But Governor Umaru Fintiri described the development as a travesty of democracy and asked that the airing wreck be sanctioned.
This action is no doubt prerogative, but in this situation, I appeal for calm.
Meanwhile, INEC, in a swift reaction, declared the action of the resident electoral commissioner as null and void, and also suspended the collation of results and summoned Mr. Hudu Ari to the national headquarters for investigation.
Welcome back, Sunrise Daily, and it's that matter we're looking at their fallout from the Adamawa supplementary elections. Indeed, a winner has been declared. Governor Fintiri has been returned, but before that, there was that matter of a declaration which has been conclusively called illegal by INEC and lawyers all around have called it illegal. Even the Electoral Act has said it's illegal, but Professor Okoye, who is the chairman, Information and Voter Education, Independent National Electoral Commission, joins us here to confirm again. Mr. Okoye, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
I mean, just as we're saying off camera, that you're able to sit down here. Thank you. You've had quite a run across the country. So tell us, real quick, indeed, that declaration on Sunday by the Electoral Act, legal or illegal?
No, it's completely illegal. the resident electoral commissioner is appointed as a resident electoral commissioner, and the resident electoral commissioner exercises the powers donated to him by the commission itself and also by the constitution. And the resident electoral commissioner is answerable to the commission. That is the tenor of section 6 subsection 2 of the Electoral Act. Now, during elections, the resident electoral commissioner receives materials on behalf of the commission. Now, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission is the one that appoints collation and returning officers. And returning officers and collation officers are appointed in writing. And it is only the resident electoral commissioner for the state that is privy to who is a collation officer and who is a returning officer. Because the moment the chairman makes the appointment, the chairman forwards the list of the collation and returning officers to the resident electoral commissioner for the state. And so the work of the resident electoral commissioner is completely cut out. Administrative, while that of the collation and returning officers are clearly set out both in the Electoral Act and in our regulations and guidelines.
So let's just tidy up.
Yes.
The collation officers appointed by the chairman do not answer to the REC.
They don't answer to the REC. The only thing the REC does is that the REC can assign them to the registration areas and to the local governments. And so their list is forwarded to the resident electoral commissioner, signed by the chairman. So what the resident electoral commissioner does is to look at the list and now makes a determination that in my state we have 200 registration areas or wards. I'm going to assign so and so person to this registration area, this person will go to this one, this person will go to this one, and then the same thing applies to the local governments. But for returning officers, for the federal constituency elections, returning officers for state constituency elections, and also returning officers for governorship elections are appointed by the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Even the national commissioners do not know. As at the time they got to Adamawa State, they don't even know who the returning officer for the governorship election is. It is only the resident electoral commissioner that knows.
Interesting. So Adamawa is currently on the front burner, and just yesterday we understand that the president has eventually given his approval for the immediate suspension and also the prosecution if the police finds anything, incriminating But I mean, INEC initially wrote to the IGP of police saying that, he should be investigated and also given leave to the police to prosecute him. How is that conversation currently going?
Well, we wrote to the Inspector General of Police, and we also wrote to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. We have received a response from the Office of the Inspector General of Police, and they have already commenced investigation. Our understanding is that the moment the Inspector General of Police concludes the investigation relating to the resident electoral commissioner and every other individual who is involved, and a prima facie case is established against the resident electoral commissioner, the file will be the file will be made available to the commission, and the commission will initiate the prosecution of the REC.
Are you aware of the current whereabouts of the resident electoral commissioner?
Well, we don't know where he is because after this particular incident, the commission wrote to him both in writing and also called him on the phone. He never returned any of the calls. He never answered any of the calls. And we asked him to report to the commission on Sunday. We didn't see him. We asked him to report on Monday. We didn't see him. So up to this moment, he has not reported, and we don't know his whereabouts.
Do you think that he could be declared wanted as a result of that?
Well, that is the responsibility of the Nigerian police force. If they make a determination that his presence is absolutely needed during the investigation and he's nowhere to be found, it is their prerogative and discretion to declare him wanted.
Okay, so he's not under arrest as we currently speak?
I don't know.
But one of the statements that's credited to the force PRO was the fact that, and even in the Electoral Act, that the police can't act until the INEC or an official of INEC tells them to take someone out of a polling unit, for instance, in an election process or anything that has to do with the Electoral Act. So now you're saying that nobody knows where he is. Have you asked the police to make him available? Because as if we're going by that statement and what's in the Electoral Act, the police can't even touch him until you tell them to. You've asked the police to investigate. Have you told them to produce him? Have you asked the police to produce him?
No, it is the responsibility given to the commission under the law is to prosecute. The responsibility and the function and the duty of arrest and investigation resides with the security agencies, and in this case, the Nigerian Police Force, which is the lead agency in terms of election security. We have formally written to the Inspector General of Police, detailing what the issues are, detailing the infractions we believe that the resident electoral commissioner committed. And we have asked him to act, investigate, and if possible, make an arrest. And if he establishes a prima facie case, that the case file should be made available to the commission, and the commission will initiate the prosecution. So we have followed the law, and we have followed the process and the procedures.
Well, we haven't seen you since the conduct of the presidential elections. It's been, I mean, I don't want to, I'm looking for the right words. This morning, you've been really scarce. I recall that we had a conversation with you, I think, on the 26th of February. Then you were at the Collation Center, and that conversation was done virtually. And I think that for a number of people, it was disappointment that INEC did not live up to the promises that it made to the people of Nigeria when it came to being able to transmit the results of the elections real time. In many polling units, it was reported that, you know, regardless of the challenges that they had with the beavers, initial or much later, apart from the late deployment almost all across the country of materials, eventually voting got underway, the beavers was working, and then for people, for the polling agents to be able to transmit the results from the polling units to the IREV became a huge challenge. For those of us who were waiting in the studios, hoping to be able to monitor what was happening on the IREV, it was disappointment. And a lot of Nigerians are still, you know, wondering what happened on that election day, what happened to all of the lofty promises that INEC made with regards to the beavers and the IREV.
You know, I'm slightly very reluctant analyzing and evaluating issues around the conduct of both the presidential and National Assembly election as well as the governorship and state assembly election. Because some of the issues are already before the presidential election tribunal and also before various election tribunals. So some of these issues have been submitted to the courts, and the courts are definitely going to make a pronouncement on that, on them. Secondly, after every election, the commission engages in what we call both internal and external evaluation of the conduct of the elections to learn valuable lessons, to know where we made mistakes, and also to rectify those mistakes. But let me say this. At a very reflective moment, at a very rational moment, at a moment devoid of election, we will come to see that this election will turn out to be one of the best elections ever conducted in this country. In fact, that this election is more or less like a revolutionary situation. And I say this advisedly. I say this because if you look at the whole gamut of elections, I do not think that it will be fair to reduce the conduct of the 2023 general election to the issue of result upload alone. That will be unfair. And I say this because if you look at Section 43 of the Electoral Act 2022, it makes it optional for any political party that wants to nominate polling agents or political party agents to the 176,606 polling units where we deployed election materials. 4 political parties nominated over 170 polling agents. The APC nominated over 170 polling agents. 170,000 polling agents. The PDP nominated over 170,000. The NMPP nominated over 170,000. The Labour Party nominated over 170,000. So what that means is that at the level of the polling unit where elections took place, they were there. And the law and the process and the procedure is that the moment the votes are segregated and counted and entered into from EC8A, which is the polling unit level result, a copy will be retained by the commission, a copy will be given to the a police officer if available, and copies will be given to the polling agents of the political parties if available. So what that means is that every political party that deployed over 170,000 polling agents has a copy, original copy, or the duplicate copy of the result sheet emanating from every polling unit.
Yeah,
I'm coming. The second issue is that you have to analyze elections from a holistic perspective and not necessarily from the point of view of only result upload, because that's exactly what is trending. But as I say, the question of whether Section 64 of the Electoral Act is mandatory in terms of result upload, whether the issue of collation revolves only around uploaded results, and the other issues emanating from it have been submitted to the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal.
Yeah.
And at the fullness of time, you will come to see that the commission has done very well. Yes, we had challenges relating to the upload of the presidential election results, and we informed the Nigerians that this was the challenge we had. But our elections cannot be reduced only to that.
So the statement which you issued was issued only after we had that conversation with you on the 26th of February. It would seem that Nigerians were taken for granted. For a number of people, they will also tell you, whilst they're not reducing the entire gamut of the elections to the upload of election results, that for them was the game changer. And INEC, at different, led by its chairman, at different fora, made a promise to Nigerians that the IREV will work. It seemed like it was a solemn promise that was made to Nigerians, and on the 25th, on the 25th, that promise was broken. The least that Nigerians expected was an explanation and perhaps an apology, an acknowledgement of what had happened in terms of the promise that was made and what was delivered. You don't think that the Nigerian people deserve an apology for that?
We made an explanation on what had happened, and we are yet to really evaluate our processes and procedures because we are still conducting elections. But you will also agree with me that there was result upload during the governorship election. There was result upload during the state assembly election. That there was result upload during the senatorial election, and there was result upload during the House of Representatives election. It was in the presidential upload that there were challenges. So I think that, yes, there were challenges, there were problems, and we tried to explain. But we must also acknowledge that in relation to A, B, C, and V, that the commission did very well. I think that an acknowledgement of the fact that there were places and situations where we rose up to the occasion will be very, very helpful. But we cannot reduce the entire 2023 election to the challenges we had with the presidential upload.
Okay, go ahead. But I know that my colleagues in Lagos are also burning.
They have questions they want to ask you. But just before our colleagues in Lagos come in, there's this matter of a review of the results, for instance. Staying with that February 26 elections. When INEC was declaring the results at the ICC, for instance, some parties walked out, and their concern was about some things they were not agreeing with. And by the Electoral Act, INEC is supposed to review its results, the results declared. True or false?
You don't.
No, I'm coming. INEC is supposed to review its results, right?
No, if you look at section 65 of the Electoral Act, it is within the power of the Commission to review declarations made. If you recall,
well, how many days after the declaration? 7 days.
Let me put it this way: constitutionally and legally, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission has been appointed as the returning officer for the presidential election. Now, if he makes a return and people believe that the return that was not made in consonance with the Constitution, in consonance with the regulations, and also in consonance with the law, they can write to the Independent National Electoral Commission for a review. and the commission is obligated to carry out that review within a period of 7 days. You do not begin a review when collation is still ongoing.
So the question then is,
yes,
we've agreed that this INEC can review
if
the parties demand a review of the result. Do they have to demand for it?
Well, if a political party demands a review and there are genuine and concrete evidence for that particular review, definitely the commission will review.
So let me read that section 65 clearly. Provided that, let me read from 1 or I. The decision of a returning officer shall be final on any question arising from or relating to unmarked ballot papers, rejected ballot paper, and declaration of scores of candidates and the return of a candidate.
Yes.
Provided that the commission shall have the power within 7 days to review the declaration and return where the commission determines that said declaration and return was not made voluntarily or was made contrary to the provisions of the law, regulations and guidelines and manual for the election. A decision of a returning officer under Section 1 may be reviewed by an election tribunal or court. Yes. That's a different one. But this other one, about 7 days of review.
Yes.
Has INEC reviewed these results since that declaration?
Nobody has asked us to make any review.
Even though they did it physically at the collation center?
No.
You think, okay, it has to be done in writing?
You have to do it in writing. As at the time they were doing all those things, a declaration and a return has not been made. The law says that you can apply for review after declaration and return has been made. Collation was still ongoing when all those things were going on. And so that is not within the contemplation and tenor of Section 65 of the Electoral Act.
No, did you say after the return has been made?
Look at Section, read it. You have to read from, if you look at Section 65 itself, it says, the decision of the returning officer shall be final on any question arising from or relating to declaration of scores of candidates and the return of a candidate. Declaration of the scores of the candidates and the return of a candidate.
Okay, but before you went to the C, the B says...
Then it says, provided that the commission shall have power within 7 days to review the declaration and return.
Mr. Okoye, my colleagues in Lagos are waiting. Yes. Let's look at A. Yes. Unmarked ballot papers.
Yes.
B. Rejected ballot papers.
Yes.
These were some of the things that they complained about on that day.
Rejected ballot papers.
Now, C, you just went straight to declaration of scores and of candidate and return of candidate. That's that's the one you read. But what about the A and B?
It says, who is the returning officer in this case?
Okay, so we'll come back to this. Our colleagues in Lagos have questions for you. Ayo.
Yeah, thank you, Nyota. And following, coming off on the back of the question you asked him, Nyota, that means that, a declaration would have been made by a returning officer in this case now, not a resident electoral commissioner. So in this case, a review cannot be made based on what Rec. Yunusa Ari has declared, albeit illegally, in the Adamawa supplementary governorship election, right?
Well, what the resident electoral commissioner did was completely unconstitutional, it was illegal, and was completely null and void. So what we did was to just ask the returning officer that was appointed by the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission to go back to Adamawa State and go and complete collation of the results, which he had already started. Under our law, under our constitution, under our regulations and guidelines, the resident electoral commissioner only receives the top copy of the result sheet after the returning officer has made a declaration. And so he has no role whatsoever to play in terms of collation of results and also in terms of making a return and making a declaration of the scores of candidates.
So following from that now, it presupposes that you cannot build something on nothing. So the candidate of the APC heading to court now seeking a judicial review, even if it was an election petition court now, the court cannot grant that because it's not a returning officer that made that declaration in the first place. Besides the fact that the process had not been completed, it was illegally done by a resident electoral commissioner whose office it is not to make that declaration, I imagine.
Well, my understanding of Section 285 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is that we have two trajectories to the issue of litigating issues arising from nominations and from elections. If an issue occurs before the conduct of election, you go to the Federal High Court, which has exclusive jurisdiction over pre-election matters. If a return has been made, if a declaration has been made, you go to an election petition tribunal, since you are talking about a return, a declaration, and a return having been made. And so as far as I know, as far as my own understanding of the law is concerned, we are now in a post-election period, and the Federal High Court or a State High Court does not have jurisdiction to entertain any matter relating to the declaration of results and the return of a candidate.
Besides the matter of jurisdiction, I just want to clarify that, that the prayer cannot be granted because it wasn't a returning officer as constitutionally required that made the declaration, but a resident electoral commissioner whose powers it is not to make the declaration. But let's, also continue with a review of the Adamawa election process and look at what may have been prevented before we got to that illegal declaration. Prior to that, Mr. Okoye, complaints had been made about the resident electoral commissioner by the candidate of the PDP who has now been returned elected. And, there were allegations made by him and the party to the extent that the resident electoral commissioner was going to compromise the process and, in fact, had been seen, with the candidate of the APC, in nocturnal visits. And, of course, to the extent also that there were confessional statements he made that he had been ordered to help the candidate win. And we asked him on this program also if these complaints had been made to the commission and to the extent that they requested that the resident electoral commissioner be recalled. Did the commission receive any such complaint? And if it did, why didn't it make efforts, moves to recall the resident electoral commissioner before the supplementary election?
During the election period, political actors, political parties, and different interest groups make various and varied allegations against collation officers, against returning officers, against resident electoral commissioners, against presiding officers, and a whole gamut of election duty officials. What this commission does is that when we get any petition against any of our resident electoral commissioners or any electoral officer or any ad hoc staff, the commission tries to investigate some of these things to find out whether there's any veracity to it or whether there is just malicious. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission invited the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State to Abuja after the conduct of that particular election. And he came, and I'm aware that the chairman put some of those allegations to him, and he denied all those allegations to the effect that he has not compromised the electoral process and that he does not have any dealing with any political party. So based on that, he was asked to go back to his duty post. But as a form of assurance, the chairman of the commission also made a determination that for the supplementary elections, and based on some of the issues arising, that national commissioners were going to go and superintend the supplementary election in various states. For instance, 3 national commissioners were deployed to Kebbi State. I was one of the national commissioners deployed to Kebbi State to go and superintend the election. 2 national commissioners were deployed to Adamawa State. And I'm aware, a national commissioner was deployed to Rivers, a national commissioner was deployed to Imo State, a national commissioner was deployed to, I think, Ogun State. So all national commissioners were, and the national commissioner was deployed to Sokoto State, and one was deployed to Zamfara State. So national commissioners were out. So we expected that the presence of national commissioners in some of these states was going to be have a sovereign effect on resident electoral commissioners, even if some of them want to do something untoward. But what the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State did was brazen, was audacious, and was completely out of place. And we are still trying to understand his mental makeup and what led him into some of the things he did, because we had a retreat with some of these with the resident electoral commissioners, where we told them clearly that The powers they exercise as resident electoral commissioners are powers donated to them by the commission itself, and that under section 6 subsection 2 of the Electoral Act, they are answerable to the commission. And they're also aware that under no circumstance are they permitted to act as returning officers in any election.
Speaking of national commissioners,
is to sit with the returning officers, and when the returning officer has made a return, copies from EC8B and from EC8E are given to him or to the resident electoral commissioners for safekeeping. That is their only role. So for a resident electoral commissioner to go and usurp the powers of a returning officer was completely audacious and out of place.
Speaking of national commissioners, because Ayo is raring to go as well, was the commission also aware about reports of, division within the ranks of the national commissioners and the resident electoral commissioner in Adamawa State? And if you were aware, was that sufficient for a recall? That's besides the allegations made by the PDP in that election?
There was no division. The moment national commissioners arrive in the states, they exercise the powers of the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, and they embody the powers of the commission. When the two national commissioners realized that the resident electoral commissioner was going in a direction that was going to compromise the electoral process, that was going to derail the entire election, they asked him to step aside. And that is exactly what they were supposed to do. And that was why he moved quickly to go and execute a plot, to go and execute a plan that he had already hatched. So there was no division whatsoever. The resident electoral commissioner is not at par with national commissioners, and the powers of the national commissioners are the powers of the commission. And any national commissioner in any state embodies the spirit and the powers of the chairman of the commission and the spirit and the powers of the commission in that particular state. So there was no division, there was no dissension.
Mr. Okoye, how significantly does this situation, the Adamawa example we're discussing now, how significantly does it question the processes of people coming into INEC? By that I mean the process of getting in resident electoral commissioners, national commissioners, returning officers, and all of that. How does it in any way question the process? And because one of the questions a number of people are asking is, does INEC have the power, for instance, to query or deal with in any way, administratively or whichever way, a resident electoral commissioner who erred in office as the issue under review?
I was a member of the Electoral Reform Committee set up by late President Yaradua in 2007 to review the electoral legal framework. And I know that we made far-reaching recommendations on how to re-engineer and reconfigure the appointment of both resident electoral commissioners and national commissioners of the Independent National Electoral Commission. I believe very sincerely that we must have a framework that allows the commission to have both to exercise the power of appointment and the power of discipline of resident electoral commissioners. If you had the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State kept on telling the national commissioners that were deployed to Adamawa State that the way national commissioners were appointed was the way he was appointed, and that the way national commissioners are removed is the same way he is removed, and that he's not answerable to the national commissioners because he was appointed by the president. And I think that we cannot have that type of situation. But what he did is just an aberration. I know we have very fine resident electoral commissioners in various states of the Federation, and they know the extent of their powers, and they have been conforming to the duties assigned to them by the Commission. So I want to view his behavior as an isolated event and does not represent what our resident electoral commissioners are all about, because I know that some of them worked assiduously to make sure that we delivered on our mandate.
Allow me to take you back to the issue you and Nyota were discussing earlier on Section 65 of the Electoral Act of 2022. The first line says, the decision of the returning officer shall be final on any question arising from or relating to unmarked ballot paper, rejected ballot paper, and declaration of scores of candidates and the return of a candidate. In other words, from the very beginning, whatever the returning officer says is final. But then it also says that the commission shall have the power within 7 days to review the declaration and return of the candidate. What the law didn't say here is the process of getting that done, of that review, the 7-day review, and how significantly that will impact on a decision that INEC took before. Take us through the process of those 7 days review. You said that the declaration and return have to be made before that 7 days can begin to count. Take us through the review, through the process of that review.
Now, you need to look at section 65 very carefully. The first issue is, issue here is, it says the decision of the returning officer shall be final on any question arising from or relating to 1, unmarked ballot paper and rejected ballot paper. So the commission has nothing to do with the decision of a returning officer on these 2 issues. Whatever the returning officer has done relating to the issue of unmarked ballot paper or rejected ballot paper is final. However, the moment the returning officer has made a declaration and a return, and any individual feels aggrieved, or the commission itself feels aggrieved that maybe a returning officer has made a return under duress, the commission now, not the returning officer in this instance, the commission now can sit back and say, look, we have had a report from a returning officer saying that he made a declaration under duress, or he made a declaration mistakenly, or he made a declaration knowing that he was not supposed to make a particular declaration, or he made fundamental mistakes relating to the scores of candidates. Now the commission can now sit back and take a look within 7 days of the declaration made by the returning officer and the return made by the returning officer. And if the commission believes that that particular return was not made voluntarily or was made contrary to the provisions of the law or regulations and guidelines or manuals of the commission can review that particular declaration and take a decision on what to do with that particular declaration or that return.
Okay, so Mr. Okoye, I'm taking you back again to I know you were still talking about the presidential elections, and that's where the question of review is coming up. But I want to ask if we now know what caused the servers not to work for the presidential elections, the IREV not to work for the presidential election, but worked for the National Assembly elections conducted on the same day.
Well, I wouldn't know. All I know, in terms of technology, I'm not too technologically savvy. There was panic, and I need to be honest, there was panic on that day when we noticed that there was a challenge. And all the ICT people gathered and were trying to find a solution to it. At the end of the day, I issued a statement and I told the nation that we had a glitch. Now, we are still in the middle of election. The moment we are through with the issue of all these elections, we will sit down as a commission and do both internal and external review of the entire gamut and entire processes leading to this election. And I'm sure that at that particular moment, those who were involved and those who were in charge of our ICT facility will come and soberly and rationally explain to the commission what exactly happened and what went wrong and what should be done.
I'm sure you've heard people saying that, you know, that the servers were switched off and there was an internal sabotage within INEC.
Honestly, I wouldn't know. But I do not think that the commission, after making promises to the Nigerian people, will turn around and sabotage itself. It's not rational. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, but let me quickly also ask you about, you know, eventually when results were uploaded, you know, people were complaining that, you know, what were the results at their polling unit centers were not the results that were uploaded for them. I do not know whether, you know, in its own audit, if the commission will take those instances into cognizance to investigate, you know, what could have caused caused, in some instances, outright mutilation of result sheets, and perhaps find out from its officers in those instances what happened there, and if there are infractions that have been committed, perhaps prosecute them. Is this something that the Commission will be willing to take on?
Definitely. But you know, we are going to conduct this review, and this review will be very thorough. But we must also be very careful about just relying on social media narration on this election. And I'm still saying that we should be careful about reducing the entire 2023 election to the issue of result upload relating only to the presidential election. Okay. Members of the National Assembly elected, we gave some of them certificates yesterday. Some of them confessed that they are in the National Assembly because of the beavers. Some of them confessed that ordinarily that they will not even near the National Assembly if things were done the way they were done before. So I think that significant things and fundamental things have happened in this election, and we must acknowledge the gains we have made, and then look at the challenges and the problems, and then deal with them, so that our electoral process can continue.
When will this audit take place?
The moment we are through with with the elections.
That's
No, we are not through with the. We are still giving certificates. We gave so many certificates yesterday, and there are some who went for lesser Hajj and are yet to come back to collect their certificates. Okay. And so we still have one or two issues to sort out.
Do you know when that will be? When will the review take place? The audit?
When the Commission has to take a decision on that. No decision has been taken.
Okay, Mr. Okoye, we are out of time, but you need to answer this questions real quick. The Ogun governorship election, the PDP candidate, has he written to INEC to review the results there? What's INEC doing about that?
Well, there were so many letters we received for review of both governorship, state assembly, national assembly elections. So, where those reviews are extensive, we did advise that they should approach the Election Petitions Tribunal. Okay. And so many of them have approached the Election Petitions Tribunal, and we believe that justice will be done in those tribunals.
Then another question we want to ask you here is the Labour Party primaries in Imo State. Did INEC monitor all 4 parallel primaries? Because there are 4 candidates gunning for 1 ticket there.
Well, we have not received a report on the issue of party primaries in Imo and relating to the Labour Party. But I want to say that political parties should try as much as possible to use their own internal mechanism to deal with their own internal problems. When you have factions in your party, don't come and dump it on the commission. Try as much as possible to resolve the matters first before asking the commission to intervene in your internal affairs.
And how does INEC, the members of the commission, pull themselves away from their desires in their various states of origin?
Their desires how?
Yes, like you have something you would desire, a political party or a political candidate to rule your state. How do you separate yourself from that desire to see your state being ruled by anybody?
No, national commissioners do not supervise their states of origin.
I didn't say supervise.
Yes, and the moment you have taken the oath your oath of office, you know that the work of being an umpire is a very, very serious one, and you have to take your work seriously. So no matter your ideological persuasion, no matter your religious persuasion, no matter the type of feelings you have for a political party, you have to put it in a basket until you leave office.
Thank you very much. Mr. Festus Okoye is the National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education on INEC. Thank you for coming to the studio today.
I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Just stay with us. Welcome back. So we're switching gears to the environment, looking at what's happening. There's been predictions of rain, not just the rains, the floods. I mean, 2022 we had floods across the country, and a lot of property was destroyed, and then farmlands were destroyed as well. So over 1 million people were displaced, and some lives were lost in the course of those floods. But now there's been this prediction that it's going to happen again. What do we do? What's causing these floods? To look into this with us, we have an environmentalist, Dr. Paul Abolo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nelson. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Dr. Abolo, The floods is like a perennial. We get this every year. We get floods every year. Sometimes they say it's the dam that was opened in the Cameroons that flowed down and caused the floods. But other times it just, whenever there rains, we have places flooded here in Nigeria. Let's start with what exactly causes this flooding year in, year out?
All right. Flooding is caused by a primary cause, and you have a secondary cause. The primary cause is climate change, like we know, intense precipitation, heavy rainfalls. But the secondary cause has to do with anthropogenic effects, what I mean man-made. To a large extent, like you talked about, the dams being opened up, then the channels, natural water channels, clogged. People build indiscriminately across the water channels, and our behavior to how we manage our waste, which ends up in the drainage. So those are the secondary effects. Do you want to hear more about the impacts? Yes, the impact is heavy on our lives and livelihoods, on farms. People are displaced. Economy is being disrupted. And yesterday I heard in the news about a young boy who died carried away by the flood. So it's huge. And here we come again, we're talking about flood. So the question is, what are we doing and what are we doing differently?
That's precisely where I want us to go, because last year we saw the disruptions that it had on farms, on farmers' lives, on food production, on even the economy in general, because at some point energy was also affected. In the northern part of the country, fuel couldn't get here as a result of, the country being cut in two. Somewhere in Lokoja, the Kogi state was experienced very severe floodings as well. It was floods that we haven't seen, from what we understand, since 2012. Bayelsa was literally underwater. So I'm wondering, what should we be doing differently? Because we have been warned by NIMET that the rains are coming and that they're going to come, torrentially this time around. We don't know, whether we're going to have the same kind of flooding situation, but what should we be doing with this sort of predictions?
Absolutely. NIMET is doing well with early warning information, but what do you do with the information? You need to do two things. One, you need the tools and you need the actions. So let's just look at climate action. Climate action talks about mitigation and adaptation. So there are two things we need to do. Mitigation is to reduce the cost of the problem, while adaptation is to reduce the impact of the problem. So with mitigation, we need to look at the basic things. One, the dam. They are going to release water from the dams again. We are not intentional about what we need to do to stop the water from causing the havoc and devastation. We need to build buffer dams. We need to do something different. Number two, we need to also desilt the rivers. The rivers are not as deep as they used to be. So number three, we need to look at behavioral changes. How do we manage our waste? I'll give you a quick example. I was in the boat and the guy finished drinking water and he threw the bottle away. I said, stop, pick it up. And he was reluctant. I said, if you don't pick it up, I'll arrest you. When he had arrest, he stopped and picked it up. Mm-hmm. And then we now began to talk about behavior and behavioral. I said, this that you've done here will also increase the impact of flooding in our areas. He understood it and he took the lectures. So we have to do something with the information. Now, on the adaptation end, it's not enough to just get the news and get the warning. We need to be intentional about what we do. What do? Do we build buffer dams? I haven't heard that being talked about. I just hear about the flood is coming. But what has the federal government, the state governments, the local governments, what are they putting in place? What structures are we putting in place? We are aware that people are building across the natural waterways. There are structures that are there right now that shouldn't be there. What are the actions that have been taken to remove those structures? I haven't heard about massive desilting of the rivers. I know yesterday I heard Dr. Magalo talking about doing some work in dredging some rivers, but that needs to be undertaken at a huge level So it's not just enough to say the rains are coming again. They are coming again. What are you doing? So you're just sitting and waiting for the rains and the devastating impacts to hit you.
Of all the three items, when you spoke about mitigation, building buffer dams, the silting the rivers, and behavioral change, it would seem that, you know, when you list them in that order, I know that the easiest one will be to do will be the third one. Maybe not the easiest, but at least it's somewhere where we can start.
It's reachable.
Yes, it's reachable. It's a low-hanging fruit if we're serious about it.
Yes.
But if you talk about buffer dams, you now begin to talk about long-term projects. It might not be realizable for this particular,
in the
yes, in the immediate. So, and then desilting the rivers. How big a deal is that? Because it's something we've been speaking of for a while. We've been talking about dredging our rivers. We've been talking about making them, you know, passable even for vessels to be able to navigate and, you know, carry cargo to other parts of the country. Why is it so difficult for us to desilt our rivers?
No, the technology is there, so it's not difficult. It's the will. The difficulty lies in the will to do it, not that the technology is not there. It's a simple technology. And there are other huge benefits from doing that. Like you said, the vessels can move, we won't have the flood. By the time you look at the consequences of the impacts of the flood, you will find that if you put this on the balance sheet, it's cheaper to desilt the rivers than to deal with the impacts. One life lost is a whole lot too much. Last year, we had over 600 people died, 2.4 million people, 2,400 people were injured, 1.4 million people were displaced. That is huge. Agriculture was impaired. Over 320,000 hectares of land was affected. Over 500,000 hectares of farmlands were destroyed. And you know what that's doing to our nation? 19 million people are facing food security challenges. Over 14.7 million children faced with malnutrition as a result of this.
And it's so interesting to talk about malnutrition because that's where we started our conversation from this morning. But look, as an environmentalist, are you concerned that when it comes to matters of the environment, we seem to be more like a disciple? It doesn't appear that we understand the impact you know, that we all have on the environment and, you know, how the environment is also impacted. This is basic social studies we learned in GS1. So I'm just wondering, are you not alarmed as to how we're taking matters concerning the environment with levity?
Well, that takes us to the number 3 point, behavioral change. People don't know. When people don't know, they cannot actually cooperate with you. So back to one of the things I've always advocated, apart from the social studies, climate education in schools is very important. From the primary level to the secondary levels, climate change has become such a big issue affecting our lives and livelihoods that you must add it into the curriculum. People need to know. And then when the children learn about climate change at school, they'll teach their parents at home.
It hasn't been done yet?
No, hasn't been done.
Dr. Paul, let me...
Yes.
Marcus talked about the low-hanging fruit, which is sensitization, and government says they've started sensitization. We saw that in the news, that they've started sensitization around the potentially floodable areas.
Yes.
But let's look at the other part about dredging. I mean, if we go all the way back to 2006, contracts were awarded, for instance, to dredge the Calabar port. In 2018, contracts were awarded to dredge, I think, Warri. That's in 2018. In 2022, contracts were awarded to dredge River Niger and River Benue. In 2023, a former head of the NPA comes out to reveal that she was fired because of a certain dredging contract. So these dredging contracts have been awarded over time. Let's just say from 2006, for instance, up till now, contracts awarded, dredging not done, or desilting the river channels not done. And we know that that's one of the fastest way to reduce flooding. What should government be doing if indeed there's that interest in ending the flooding situation we seem to experience every year?
So that brings me back to my discussion with Marwa earlier. The will. You know, we need to establish the will to do it. We need to understand the impact of flooding on lives and livelihoods. We need to understand the severity of flooding. We need to understand the impacts on critical infrastructure. So it's not enough to award the contracts. I don't know what happened with the contracts, but we need to ensure that the contracts are implemented.
So viewers, I mean, maybe not just any kind of viewer, but people are curious to know about weather reports. I mean, yes, we have the yearly predictions that INEC gives, but on a daily basis, I mean, most countries, even us here, we do weather report letting you know whether it will be rainy or sunny. But how can we put this weather report to better use for our daily lives?
Yes, absolutely. The weather reports are given. NIMET is doing a great job. Nigerian Hydrological Agency Services, they're doing a great job, but it doesn't get to the grassroots. The awareness needs to be broken down to the level where the people at the local government areas, at the communities, not only will they get the information, but they need to understand the impacts.
We need to break it down in their languages.
In their languages too. And then they need to understand the impacts so they will see themselves in it. And that will bring us back to the behavioral change. So we have the big news, we talk about it, talk the big numbers. How many people understand the numbers? People are more interested in the impacts on how it affects them, how it affects their lives and livelihoods, how it affects their children, like the woman who lost her child due to flood. That situation, that incident, though it's not good, could be used as a tool, as a model to communicate this to other people in the community that somebody lost their child, their 2-year-old child, to flood. Flood just carried, and the woman was just watching her child go. The fear of that will make people behave right and do what is right at the individual level. At the local government level, the local governments are responsible for putting policies and structures in place. We used to have sanitation once a month. It looked like it was a mere exercise, but it was doing something. We need to reinforce it. We need to develop things more like that on a larger scale, starting from the lower level, so that it will become part of our culture, part of our ways, part of the things that we do. We really need to deal with this problem, I'm telling you, because it's increasing by the day. And every year we hear it, it comes, it goes, it disrupts our economies, it disrupts our farms, people's lives are lost. And then when it's gone, people start acting as if nothing ever happened again. Then a few months later, we say, it's coming again. And people are waiting for it to come without anything being done. So it's such a vicious cycle that you just get tired of it. Something extraordinary needs to be done.
Thank you very much. That's a good place to leave it, Dr. Abolo. We do hope that everyone heard and will do something about this matter. Thank you. Dr. Paul Abolo is an environmentalist, and he was sharing his thoughts on what to do about the flooding situation that's been predicted. Again, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Sunrise Daily. Do we have any tweets, Wells?
None that I can see for now, but we're already out of time as it is. So well, hopefully when we do get, when our producers put them up, we'll be able to take them when next we come back on air. But we wish you a very splendid holiday season. Yes, there'll be no work generally on Monday, but we'll be here.
We'll be here.
So stay with us throughout the weekend and also on Monday. Thank you for watching today. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf.
Thank you for the mails, the tweets, and don't worry, we'll get to read them on Monday. But again, enjoy the rest of the holiday. I'm Neo Taibi.
Well, timing up to just say that more than 600 people died in last year's flooding. So where there's a will, there's a way. Government must do the needful to prevent that in 2023. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day and happy Salah.